first sponsor we have is Eden Ventures.
All right. Okay. Well, listen, thanks very much for coming for this evening. This was an idea that Janita had, which we were really proud to support. So I've been looking at fashion and technology for a long time. I mean, I've lost a lot of money in fashion and technology. I see one person smiling wryly in the audience, which is good. So, you know, I put some money in boo.com, lost a lot of money. I also lost some money a few years ago in another fashion startup. But last year I had the opportunity to go to New York and to see an event in, I think it was April, May, which was social media meets fashion. And I was just so impressed by what I saw that I thought, God, this is really, really hot. You know, social media can really make a massive difference in fashion. And I was really upset that actually I had to go to New York to see that because, you know, this is London, this is Europe, we've got London, we've got Paris, we've got Milan. You know, we've had fashion, we've had Yoox, we've had Net-a-Porter, we've had ASOS. You know, for God's sake, we've got Vivienne Westwood and Alice Temperley. You know, this is something that Europe should do really well. You know, we don't have Facebook, we don't have Twitter, we don't have Google, but God knows we should be able to do fashion on the internet and fashion in social media. So that's why I was really keen to come and support this event. It was really great to see Janita doing it, and it was really great to see all you guys here. And also thanks for Forward for having us here today. So you know, let's ask some tough questions. Let's give the panelists a hard time.
Yes.
And you know, let's get stuck in. Thanks,
Great.
Janita.
Great. Thank you, Ben. And the next sponsor we have is Zuneta.
So I'm from a beauty retail background, but equally as interesting, I think, on fashion, there's a lot of common themes. So I'll introduce my company quickly for those of you that haven't heard of it. We're Zulu Beauty, so I own two fashion beauty retailers. One is Zuneta. We specialise in luxury cosmetics, and content is super important to us on Zuneta. We use a lot of video content, do a lot of social media activities, so really relevant to the same sort of way that we're talking to our customers as fashion brands would be. And then Love Lula is Europe's biggest natural and organic retailer. And so what's really interesting is that fashion and beauty are massively under-penetrated in e-commerce. Fashion, just 8%, and beauty at 4%. So huge, huge, huge opportunity for these categories online. And investors are obviously really interested in the luxury market as well online. $800 million was invested in luxury online last year, which is 6 times that of 2010. So a huge opportunity for anyone thinking of making the move online at the moment. So content is absolutely key, I think, for the luxury sectors online. We, as I said before, we do a lot of online content, video, anything that allows the customers to interact with our brand, and that's what's allowed us to really grow quickly in the last 3 years. And 3 out of 4 wealthy, more than 3 out of 4 wealthy customers under the age of 45 are online, are on social networks, are wanting to interact with their brands. So here's an example of a brand that's doing it extremely, extremely well. I'm sure you're all watching and probably watched the show that was on an hour ago online. And finally, there's never been a better time to go online. So good luck to those that are planning on making the transition.
So we are having 2 panels for today. The first panel we'll talk about community and curation and new tools. And we will have a 5-minute break. And then we will talk about platforms and investment. So again, this is a fishbowl discussion. Please feel free to come in front and join in. So first we'll start with a short introduction of the panelists. Maybe James, you'd like to start?
Hi, I'm James, and I sit as Editor-in-Chief of Stylenoir magazine, which is completely online. I've also consulted for MySpace, BBC, and Mask and Makeup on social and online media.
I'm Christine de Leon. I'm the owner and founder of Very Nice Threads. It's a blog that documents street style in London and offers suggestions for sort of more sustainable alternatives to mainstream fashion. And and I also consult arts organizations on social media.
Can you speak up?
Yes, I also consult social media for arts organizations.
Hi, I'm Ryan. I'm the lead designer for Inensu, and we created Closet Swap, which is our sustainable fashion platform, and we also have a music platform called Superfam.
Hi, I'm Katie. I'm an analyst at Edited, and we basically provide the fashion industry with data, social and commercial data, in order that they make better business decisions. And we're trying to change the way that they look at trend forecasting.
Thank you. So I'll start with this. An ethical fashion blogger, an editor, and 2 startups were at a bar. And someone came up to them and said, "Oh my gosh, did you see that John Rocha finale dress on the runway?" The fashion blogger says, "Yeah, I've already put together a vintage piece that was inspired by John Rocha, taken photos of myself, and put it on my website." And the editor says, "Yeah, 3 of my writers wrote about John Rocha, and they had hundreds and hundreds of comments." One fashion startup said, "I can tell you 5 other designers that has the similar color palette this season." And the other fashion startup says, "Well, I'm making sure that there's a secondary marketplace for the person who buys the dress when it goes out of fashion." While this short piece encapsulates our discussion today, we are not really talking about the dress per se, but we are talking right now about everything that surrounds the dress, about the community that's built around fashion, about the ideas of curation, new ways of consumption of fashion via the web, and how new startups are building new tools that enables the industry to understand more about all the content that is proliferating on the web. So perhaps we could start a bit with the idea of image. Fashion is about building that perfect image, and it used to be the forte of the magazines to decide what was the perfect image. But right now, with things going on in the blog sphere, the perfect image is no longer determined by the magazine. What do you think?
Well, I think that's correct. I think that the gatekeepers in the publishing industry for fashion no longer hold the same power that they did even, let's say, 5 years ago. And I think what's happened is with online publishing platforms becoming easier and easier for a 12-year-old in the Midwest or in Cornwall somewhere to say what they think they like about fashion and what style they love, has broken the model. So the publishing, yes. the print publishing industry model of being the arbitrators of taste, the gatekeepers of what fashion we should be liking, has just broken because we're online. And I think one of your sponsors said it already, that statistic of how many people under the age of 45 are online all the time. I'm not saying that people don't flick through magazines anymore and don't have a need or a desire for that tactile experience, but the opinion makers no longer live in publishing houses.
So who are the new opinion makers?
Well, it's you, it's me, it's James, it's whoever has a passion and shares a need to share that passion with a community. It's completely, what it's done is it's democratized the dissemination of the image. So someone, a blogger can turn the lens on herself or himself and publish that image online, and there will be someone who takes that. There will be someone who takes that and places a value on it. Actually, Edited does that, does exactly that. So, you know, what may on the surface seem like quite a vain diary of what I'm wearing today actually feeds into trend forecasting in a way that has just sped up the industry at a rate of knots, whereas you used to have to get some person out on the street looking, sniffing around, and now...
interest in what is happening on the street?
Well,
why do you think the camera lens has turned?
Because we live in London, and if you look at punk, you look at jungle, you look at grime, it all comes from the street. And that's where the creativity is. That's where the real energy comes from. And that eventually filters up into design, product, and becomes luxury. But you look at any of the designers, Gaultier, McQueen, Westwood, you ask them where their inspiration comes from, and it comes from the street.
Why do you think people are emboldened right now to turn the camera on themselves? And what is this new?
Yeah, when we were doing research for Closet Swap, we wanted to aim to teen market for a sustainable fashion platform without being overtly so. We didn't want to tell people that buying things is bad, but at the same time, we just wanted to make people think about what they're buying already. Can they give it to someone else? Can it be modded? Can it be upstyled? And one of the key discoveries for us was the fact that every single one of these tiny groups, because we were aiming it for people who saw each other every day at school or at work, there was always a style maven. There was someone who was kind of like your friend who just knows about that. I've got that fashion friend guy. And everyone would kind of like amalgamate around this person sort of online, and that's how they'd find out all their stuff. So it's just about kind of how can I say, making that person into the kind of the blogger within your mini life. So it's not necessarily a national blog or something like that that's going out on the internet everywhere, but it's going within your mini social circles. And because it's a friend of yours, you already have that kind of backstory that you need to know about them as being trustworthy or whether they're a bullshit or whatever. But the main thing about it is that they are a kind of mini brand themselves within your friend circle that you can trust about fashion.
Right.
So that was what we did in terms of enhancing it. And I guess just to sort of finish off that point, the idea of turning your camera on yourself at that point is just, yeah, it's nothing more than a platform. It's just a place for you to kind of speak out and speak to people that trust you and that you trust, and hopefully that you'll get some kind of synergy going. I can't believe I just said synergy, but some kind of symbiotic relationship to make it sound even more pretentious.
Right. Just picking on your point about personalities, that some of your friends are somehow style icons in their own right. Perhaps, James, you could address that in your editorial, because it's a unique personality, a unique voice as an editorial.
Yeah, well, I mean, what we do at Stylenoir, we're very different to any other fashion online magazine or magazine, where our writers do kind of embody the brand to 100% degree. So we do pick our people for their individuality, for their creative. We push individuality to a huge amount. And so our writers are very independent, and they look their individual style, which is very specific, which basically means that people tend to follow our writers as well as our content. So you might, I mean, one of our main writers is called Minxie White, and she's done quite a bit for in photo shoots and things like that for big people. And it kind of basically means that her fan base is built around that look, and it means that people follow her content specifically. We do get a lot of traffic when people are on the site that basically they click through to a certain writer. Instead of following content, they want to know what a certain person has to say. And I think it's basically expanding the user from a friend, like from your friend, into a bigger environment, into a bigger scale. It's just scaling that up, basically, which I think is quite important.
To extend on that, I'm finding a similar experience as well at the moment. So I contribute to Huffington Post, and what I'm finding in my traffic is that I have a kind of a broader editorial on Huffington Post, but then when I post on this almost monolithic AOL brand, my traffic on my personal tiny little blog, independent blog, will spike, and that's exactly what you're saying. I mean, you just end up talking to different people in different ways, but if you generate that conversation in that community, you will be followed as an individual and then through the brand.
Yeah, it is about community and over content, I think, all the time.
And now, currently, bloggers and writers are becoming the intermediary layer between the brand or designer and the community. How do you think they are building that community around themselves? by writing or by taking photos?
Well, definitely one thing that comes to mind is that I think like in the early 90s there was a design thinker called Pat Jordan, and he wrote a really interesting piece about how no one trusted figures of authority, or they were beginning to not trust figures of authority, not trusting, say, the police or the FBI or the government or the doctors or whatever, but what the only people that we were doing is just trusting other consumers because you can relate to them. I'm sure that we've all been onto Amazon, taken a look at a staff review and gone, but then you go down to the user reviews, which are of course much more hilarious and accurate. But that kind of thinking almost goes to the idea of the intermediary, because the blogger is something that you can realistically aspire to in terms that you can open a blog. So that's, you know, it's much easier to say start a blog than it is to start your own printing press and make another Vogue. Yeah. So you can do that quite nicely, and that's a point of relation. So it kind of increases subtly the trustworthiness of that particular person because they're blogging. And even it could be funded by, you know, the Daily Mail multiplied by Rupert Murdoch multiplied by Hitler and Satan. It doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is that it's something that you can relate to on a sort of more personal level, and that creates an implicit trust.
Yeah. It does cause, like, you have to be careful, I think, though, as well, because as you're saying, like, it's so much easier to relate to that. But at the same time, I did see news channels start this when Twitter really kind of took off, where they'd quote Twitter users or bloggers as if they had some authority. So it's kind of odd because you have to be careful. Like, obviously, I could open a blog while I was on stage, probably from my phone. It's like, it's not hard. And so you have to be careful about who to trust, because just because someone has a platform to speak doesn't mean that they're qualified on that subject. So you do have to play that in, but definitely.
For sure. Going back to the idea of the intermediary, maybe Christine, you can say more a bit about your work with Oxfam or some other company that you've worked with.
So the Huffington Post is a much more mainstream, has a much more mainstream editorial, and obviously a larger readership than Very Nice Threads. And I took an entrepreneurial approach to them, and this is something that, if there are any Vogue or Elle editors out there, this is why the online is working, because I go to the Huffington Post and I say, I have this idea, and I pitch the idea to them, and they say, yeah, I think that'll work with our verticals. If I go to Vogue or Elle and they ask me, well, we already have an editor working on that, and so the doors immediately shut. The barriers to entry are much higher in print than they are online. And so on the Huffington Post, I wanted to really do my part in taking down the negative stereotypes of sustainable fashion and ethical fashion, and to kind of show that you can have directional forward fashion, and we're seeing that in London right now. With Aesthetica at London Fashion Week, and I wanted to show that this can be done, that this can be done in the luxury market, and so Oxfam got in touch with me and said, well, that's all well and fine, but what about taking this challenge of just wearing old stuff for all of London Fashion Week? And to me, I thought, well, that's fun. I love charity shops. I love vintage because they're one-offs and they do differentiate a person's personal style to what's mass market, and I think that's sort of the essence of street style. But from there, you know, it's not that I'm necessarily sponsored by them, but I'm approached by them to do this, and so I write about it, and in a broader sense for the Huffington Post, but then in a very personal way on Very Nice Threads, and the two sort of work into each other, and that would never happen in Vogue. I think
that is probably one of the most important facts maybe from today, which is that the online world enables people to work with brands on that level and create content of that level, which is not only exclusive, but independent to your brand and your individuality. It's the same thing we just did New York Fashion Week, and while yes, we did go to Hervé Leger and cover shows, we were much more excited about the fact that we worked with Mercedes and G-Star Raw and did a massive styling with G-Star Raw with me and one of our other independent writers, and that got so much more traffic because you're working with big brands in that kind of amalgamation of creativity, and you're creating stuff that magazines can only dream of doing.
Because it's a collaboration on a very personal level, and that is that I would argue a much more artistic approach and a more open, organic model than the, oh, I'm Burberry, I need to get Beyonce to wear my stuff. Who's her agent? It's
and that's the same thing. If Burberry approached Beyonce, they would maybe get like 2 million likes on Facebook, say, but none of those people would actually really care about the fact that that's happened. Whereas if you've got your niche audience that really care about you and you work with that big brand who actually is to do with you, the conversion rate and the money involved is so much higher because they actually care about what you have to say, they're loyal and they hang off every single word. Great example is Agent Provocateur, who obviously have a very loyal fan base. They only had like 140,000 fans on Facebook. We did a piece with them, they posted one link on Facebook, it got like 3,000 uniques just off that one post. Jessie J did the same, we wrote about her, Jessie J posted it on her Facebook. She has 2 million followers at that point, and it got less uniques than AP did. Because people they don't really care about that. They just liked it because they're not really that interested. Whereas AP have got that fan base which is really built up and is independent. And working with people like Oxfam and sustainability, people really care, and therefore the conversion rate is so much higher.
Yeah, we can talk more about that really care aspect. Like there are fans who are engaging, and then there are fans who are just like. So there is a scale involved. And how do you get people to the point where they really care about your brand online? What do you do?
Be genuine.
Be genuine.
Transparency.
Be real.
And just if someone comments right away, I mean, it's basically someone picking up a telephone and ringing you. It's just that you don't hear their voice. I mean, it's a very personal thing.
That's so right. I mean, like, you've got to be genuine, you've got to be real, you've got to do what's right for you. But then on top of that, so many people don't get that social was around thousands of years ago when we were like first invented language. And the fact is that you should engage every single person, because you miss one person, you're missing an opportunity. I know Gary Vaynerchuk, who's a huge tech blogger, he replies to every single person. He gets like 2,000 emails a day and he replies to every single one, because it's that engagement that helps you and helps your fans to follow you. It's crazy to me that people don't understand that social is a pull media. Every single media in history was push. So billboards, TV, radio, they just rammed it down your throat, they spoke at you. Now, it's pull. And it's that where you talk to people, it's just so much more important.
Any new technologies that arise, the quicker you jump upon it, the better. I mean, I think it was Burberry this week have said they're going to put everything on Pinterest around their shows, and I think that speed of adapting and being able to change your business very quickly is crucial.
It's what fashion does very well, is adapt fast.
Yeah, so right now the web has enabled the speed to go up by a few leaps and bounds really, and there's also things streaming in real time. I recently watched London Fashion Week by clicking on Stylist and just watching the stream, the video stream as it happens. So what is that obsession with real time? Maybe Katie has something to say about this.
Well, everyone is now a fashion critic. You don't have to wait until the September issues come out. You don't have to buy into someone else's opinion. You can instantly have your opinion, and you can trend spot shows yourself. So I think because we're seeing this stream of imagery, we're seeing live shows, we're seeing celebrities talking about things, we all just get involved in the conversation, and that moves so quickly that real time is crucial just to kind of tap into it.
I think there's a sort of little aside of that. One thing that I guess has sort of changed in the Twitter generation is that beforehand, while we would have had water cooler moments of talking about things where these would just disappear, now you have a little one-liner in your Twitter saying that, yeah, I just saw that, it's amazing, you retweet, etc. So you kind of turn into a mini little walking advert yourself for something. And there's this kind of weird, odd place in the internet, not that weird, but it's just a place where old media and new media exist. So you try to watch something on the BBC iPlayer over in the States and you can't see it because it's blocked in that country. I'm sure we've all looked at a YouTube video which says that Warner Music has blocked it in your grounds because we're idiots. But the fact of the matter is, what that does is it creates a little area of exclusivity. And what that means is that other people who are, say, at a fashion show that you can't watch live, that you can get loads of live tweets about it, you can see pictures of it. So it brings people in still. But unwittingly, it turns you into a walking advert. It turns you into this kind of little sort of billboard that you don't realise it, because you're actually writing something down that will stay.
But I think the people that are viewing it, they're also on Twitter. I don't think they're viewing it in a kind of displaced way. They're also on Twitter. They're not scanning for adverts. They're also making comments that aren't weighted by branding.
I kind of feel like it's having, you know, 500 people in your front room and you're all watching the same thing. I sometimes do that with Question Time. I'll like watch Question Time and then just tweet away and then watch the feeds go and it's like having a conversation with like 400 people in your front room. And the same thing applies to Fashion Week. So if you look at all the Twitter feeds and you see a show that's been streamed live, you could write about a show that you never went to.
Yes.
I would prefer to do that because we're talking about speed, right?
Yeah.
If at London Fashion Week you really cared about money and traffic, you wouldn't go to the show, you'd watch it online, write it as it was happening and post it. You'd be the first one, Google would log you in SEO and you'd get a ton of traffic through SEO and Google. So I actually think it's better if you only were concerned with audience, it'd be better to not go to the show.
Right, so if you were motivated by money, that would be the way to do it. But if you're motivated by passion and love for it, you bust your ass to get on the front row. That's what you do.
So James, what have you seen being in Fashion Week? You have been in New York and London Fashion Weeks.
Yeah, both Fashion Weeks, this time, we've done like 10 seasons now, we've treated more as a conference, to be honest with you. As I was just saying, like, if you can go to as many shows as you want, and yeah, for the love of fashion, but at the same time, if you want to build a brand, going to a show isn't really going to help that. So yeah, I mean, we went to Hervé Leger and Diesel Black Gold in New York. Those are the two favourite ones in New York, and here, Corey Nielsen is astounding. She's like the next Alexander McQueen for sure. So that was one of the favourites here. But again, what we've really been doing is building relationships and doing creative content, like the G-Star Raw piece that I mentioned. Yeah, and I mean the same thing as what I was saying about our individual readers. I got sent through this morning that one of our readers was featured in New York Times today, just because of her style and her look. And I think that's really important, which is that if you push what you're about out there instead of, basically it's between coverage and content, and I really do fight with this in my head as an editor, and I feel that if you really want to do something, you want to create something instead of cover it, because anyone can go to Fashion Week, make friends with PRs and cover fashion shows and write that someone was wearing an A-line skirt and it's black and wow, that's so exciting. Or you can create your own work, and I think it's so much more important. Like, no one's going to get it faster than Fashion 156. No one's going to go to your site instead of Vogue.com or Style.com to find out what pictures there were on the runway, because they're there already. So it's much more interesting to create your own thing, and that's what we've been doing over the last 2 weeks, doing much more into brand work than covering shows, because our readers aren't interested in us telling them. I feel it's almost an insult when you write a show report, because you're telling someone what they can see. I think it's much more, and it's much more interesting for designers if you write your own take or what you feel and your interpretation. It's like art, your interpretation of art on that. I mean, we've had so much more take-up from designers when either if I write a creative prose world around someone's design piece, we get invited to the designer's studio, etc., because they're so much more interested in what people think of their collection and actually telling people instead of just covering it and reporting what you can already see.
Slight disagreement with that. Part of that element is that there are some people out there who actually are a bit wary of brand-led collaborations, let's say, and it's true. And there are people out there who feel quite feisty about their magazine of choice not somehow being written by some corporation. And I think there is room for the individual voice and criticism and critiques of fashion shows. And there is definitely an audience. It may be niche, but there is a need for an alternate viewpoint of what is being presented at these shows. So just to say that, I do think that there does need to be some sort of curation and editing.
So isn't it just about being brave? Because isn't it, I mean, all the traditional brands, so some of whom are in the room, I mean, it's very hard to be brave when you've got a huge business that's kind of dependent on your day-to-day bread and butter, you know? It takes the new companies to get out there and change things for the better, you know?
I agree with you, because I think that it's very difficult for a big brand to change their ways. And I'm not saying that by mentality, I'm just saying in sheer physical problems. Like, if you've got a big business you're running day to day, there's lots of things you've got to get signed off, lots of things that you've got to go through for things to get okayed. I know somebody like Notion magazine, it's 35,000 print run magazine. I remember being told once they changed the logo for the entire magazine like the day before it went to print, because there's a small office, literally held up in the office, oh, this looks cool, this looks better, right? And everyone was like, yep, sweet, get it printed, done. Whereas you couldn't do that in a bigger company, and it's not because of the mentality of how people work, it's just physically you wouldn't be able to do it. And I think it is about being brave. It's being brave to be able to cut some of the boundaries down in bigger business, which is really difficult to do. I think that's why startups always innovate and are the pioneers, because there's less hoops to go through. You can make changes quicker and faster, you're nimble.
And then you can get acquired. That's the main thing. That's all we want to do, just get acquired.
Something integral, I think, to startup culture as well is that the organizations are quite flat. So the decision makings happen so fast, whereas, you know, as soon as you start reaching a certain size, you can't.
I'd just like to build up on the point of the user experience thing earlier. Prior to joining Inensu, I was actually in a user experience consultancy, and it's been really interesting going from like a large consultancy where you're working with large corporate clients, and some of which were actual fashion magazines as well, going all the way down to a 4-person startup where I'm the lead designer and also like baking usability into everything that we do. So we found that a lot of the kind of products that we were testing in a consultancy level, they all have the user testing done pretty much a couple of weeks from the end. So you've built almost about 75% of something, you get users in, they go, I don't understand this at all. Then you have like 3 weeks where you have to try to sort everything out because it's all going to launch in those 3 weeks. Whereas going the other way and having rapid iterative testing with users, engaging with users online and also bringing people in as well. I can't stress how important it is to actually sort of meet people as well when you're developing products. That was just such an eye-opener because we were getting like such great quality of feedback. You have a round table discussion, you can get more from that in a few minutes than you'd get if you were throwing out surveys left, right and center. And I know there's always that kind of danger that you're designing for the minority, but at the same time, if you take them as a sort of sample representation of a certain niche of people that will be using your product, there's still a certain niche of people that will be using your product, i.e. they are a user. So their voice is just as valid. I think it builds on what you were saying earlier about emailing back everyone who emails you. It's one of those key pieces of feedback, and it leads to better transparency and ultimately better products.
Let's move on to making sense of this whole batch of data, and Edited is perfectly suited to tell us about how they apply scientific rigor to the content that's out there.
So we do it in 2 ways. We look at social data and we quantify what people are talking about online, the amount of people talking about things, but also the sentiment towards those things. And it's not just the obvious big trends, it's the very tiny things, the colours, the sleeve shapes, everything to do with fashion. And we also look at the commercial side of things. So we've got a database of over 2 million product SKUs, and we track every bit of information about that product, when it arrives in store, when it sells out, which sizes sell out. And then what we do with those 2 different types of information is we help brands to be able to time their products better, to know their market better, and to respond to their consumers quicker. It's a simple way of listening and reacting upon fact and not sort of whimsy ideas.
So how do you think that the industry has changed with the application of your tool? What have you seen so far?
Less wastage, fewer poor decisions, being able to back up a business decision with hard facts and data is always going to be much more secure than saying, yeah, the team really wants to do this, but it's about listening to what your consumer is asking for, what they're interested in, and so we scale that. We can tell people how safe that business decision is and what timing they should be doing it.
But do you think there is a fear that there would be a feedback loop because you only focus on fashion, and if there is a certain change that happens within fashion, everybody's going to jump on that top 5 trends, whereas in the past, it has always been that different fields influence each other. So architecture was inspired by fashion, and fashion was inspired by things that happen in politics and the social sciences.
Well, we take music and art and architecture all into consideration.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, yeah. On Twitter, the kind of information that we aggregate is pulled not just from the fashion world, but from whatever's being said, whatever's been talked about on Facebook, whatever bloggers are talking about. We can apply analytics and statistics to that information.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool thing. It's such a cool app. Can you imagine, like, aggregating the top 5 colors for next season and in a particular cut? And I suppose that's really helpful for buyers and retailers who are betting on the next thing that's going to make them money. But I think we should kind of step back and not forget that at the end of it all, fashion is an art, really. And personal style is about going out into the street and touching, feeling, smelling, and seeing what you like.
But it's also, the fashion industry is an industry. People have to be industrious, and basically it needs to make money, and it generates a huge amount of money for UK. Globally, it's a massive business. And
Quick question though, if Henry Ford had asked you what to produce, you would have produced faster horses.
Horses, yeah, exactly.
So I don't think data is the answer to everything.
It's not the answer to everything, but it can certainly help make better decisions, more informed decisions. They're not necessarily the only solution to a problem, but it can only help in a business decision.
So how do you feel about being analyzed as bits of data? As writers, as bloggers.
That's the whole point about the internet, right? Is that you put stuff out there.
Yeah. It's like,
I love it.
And that's why online is storming print in most ways, because Vogue say, I don't know the exact figure, but let's just say it's 250,000, because I think it's about that, is their circulation. You don't know how much of that circulation goes in the bin, right? Demographics and reach of print is, everyone knows, is skewed. It's what they print out, but it's not actually what is consumed. And you're telling me that 3 people read every single Vogue. You can't quantify that. You can't actually tell me that as fact. Whereas online, everything is fact. And therefore, it's much more interesting because the metrics that you have are real and true. And that's why online is so good. That's it. That's just the bottom line point.
There is a limit to what metrics can do. I think you can have that set of data, and at the end, you still have to make a decision on your own, whether as a brand you want to follow that top 5 trend. Do you want to do a floral print just because everybody else is doing it? Or because everybody else is doing floral, let me do tartan instead.
But you don't have to see trends in terms of this style or this fabric. The trends are about movement of people. Yeah. Exactly. And so it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to pick those top 5 colours, but watch where the market is moving. And you don't have to create a product which fits in with that top 1, but so long as your brand is moving in the right direction, that's a trend.
Do you know, that's so, I'm thinking about it more now, and I think it is really interesting because, you know, the last great cultural movement, I would argue, in the last century in Europe was at the turn of the century when Chanel collaborated with Picasso, collaborated with the Ballet Russe, and created this piece that just made people set Paris Opera on fire. And I don't think because media was so slow back then, it was newspapers, word of mouth, it was 10, 15 years before critics could look back and see, this is what happened. But what we're able to do now through content aggregation is to look at cultural movements that are happening and analyze them within 6 months, 7 months, and possibly shorter. So the way we look at the world has become so compressed. You know, it's quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah, I think I'm still wondering what this fine grain would mean to the decisions that we will make tomorrow. It's because, let's say, a fashion designer who is inspired by a certain thought or trend that's maybe it's not a trend yet, but they pick up something, and the creative process is extremely incomprehensible. For each brand, they have such different and unique personalities. And where it comes from, perhaps it's not from what is moving what generally people are thinking, but it comes from somewhere else, you know. It comes from a part of the imagination that is not quantifiable, perhaps. Yeah. So.
I'm going to say something bold again, but I'm pretty sure that every true artistic designer isn't looking at aggregated data of trends. I'm pretty sure that Corey Nielsen, or I will say Corey Nielsen, did not go, oh, I know, Scottish, that'll be a trend. She got through to the manuscript. She found a manuscript that denoted the real times. She got so enthralled in it, and her great-grandfather was Scottish, and she really got into the depths of that and really cared about that specific subject and created a creation from that. Ada Zandishan, who's an aesthetic designer, again, really cared about a subject, a substance, and that's what true design comes from. It's a substance from an ideal that you want. It's got nothing to do with what could be a possible trend. When they've had that inspiration and you've made your collection, and then you might look at a trend chart, this trend forecasting agencies already, and then it's moving into more accurate data, so let people make less mistakes. But once that creation has become, then they might change a piece or two so they will sell more based on the data. But they're not going to base anything on data first, because it's that's why they're an artist, because it's creative from scratch.
Yes, perfect. We could also look at a few other fashion startups that are making new tools. Metail, perhaps, would you like to come and share something about what you're doing?
I work at a company called Metail. We make technology that shows how clothes look on people before they purchase them online. It's a massive challenge, technically, to do that, and lots of people have tried. We're approaching it in quite a geeky software way, but it looks fantastic and it's about to launch. What we're really excited about, which kind of joins onto this discussion, is the personalization that more data can allow. So in the process of creating a model that can be clothed online, a photo has to be uploaded, and from that we can detect your body dimensions. Now, with those body dimensions and comparing them against sizing charts and what people with those body dimensions are trying online, we can suggest and recommend clothes that are more likely to fit you, that have fit other people, that other people your size and shape have bought.
So do you think you're playing on the idea of the avatar a bit more? Because right now people are very comfortable with having an online personality, and perhaps this could be part of that bigger picture?
Yeah, I mean, people are happy putting bits of themselves online, I think. So Facebook almost owns my social identity. LinkedIn probably owns my professional identity. Twitter, my brand. And we're looking to own or be the trusted custodian of your body metrics information, so that whenever you have an interaction online that might require your body information, whether it's tailoring or trying on clothes or whatever it might be, then you can log in essentially to your passport, just like you log into Facebook Connect.
Are you saying to brands, well, you're saying this is a size 10, your customer's trying size 10s, but actually they're, are you selling the information back?
In the long term, that's the goal. Yes.
Yeah.
That what you're going to do, and other companies like that, for e-commerce is a game changer. Like, I truly believe that that is the way forward. I think that it's really difficult for people to, currently, like e-commerce and real life shopping, it's difficult to, the balance is difficult. And I think as soon as somebody does that well enough, it game changes everything. Yeah. It really does.
Yes.
Thanks. Tom, if you solve that, I think you'll be helping a lot of retailers, so really good on you to try and solve it. How has, on early customer research, do you find customers quite receptive to the idea of uploading their photographs to this sort of, suspectedly strange tool?
So we're in public beta. It's hidden away on Facebook somewhere. We're launching with a couple of customers very soon. From what we can see in our beta, there's a good proportion of customers that are happy to upload photos. There's options to not upload the photo. So it's quick and easy to upload the photo, but you can, if you know your size, your height and your weight, you can do it without the photograph.
So we are Fashiny, and we are building a fashion recommendation engine. So it's entirely an online experience. We are kind of trying to fill the gap before Metail's experience, I would say. So there's a search and discovery element related where people want to find the stuff they like. And with the increasing noise on social media and everywhere else, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find that right piece. And once you find that right piece, then the second question becomes like whether it will fit me or not. So that is why the disruption of these technologies are quite key in identifying the elements and the things you like, and then finding out whether you can buy online or offline anywhere. So this is what we are up to.
So I think we are out of time. We will have our 5-minute break, and the next panel will be up for platforms and investment. So 5-minute break. Thank you.